European groups are part of the Northern Eurasian and Circumpolar Culture Area. This culture area derives from hunter-gatherers adapted to cold, adverse climates. These culture areas are characterized by bilateral kinship relationships which recognize both male and female lines, suggesting a more equal contribution for each sex as would be expected under conditions of monogamy. There is also less emphasis on extended kinship relationships, and marriage tends to be outside the kinship groups. The historical evidence shows that Europeans, and especially Northwest Europeans, were relatively quick to abandon extended kinship networks and collectivist social structures when their interests were protected with the rise of strong centralized governments. There is indeed a general tendency throughout the world for a decline in extended kinship networks with the rise of central authority. But in the case of Northwest Europe, this tendency quickly gave rise, long before the Industrial Revolution, to the unique Western European simple household type. The simple household type is based on a single married couple and their children. It contrasts with the joint family structure typical of the rest of Eurasia, in which the household consists of two or more related couples, typically brothers and their wives and other members of the extended family. Before the Industrial Revolution, the simple household system was characterized by methods of keeping unmarried young people occupied as servants. It was not just the children of the poor and landless who became servants, but even large, successful farmers sent their children to be servants elsewhere. In the 17th and 18th century, individuals often took up servants early in their marriage, before their own children could help out, and then passed their children to others when the children were older and there was more than enough help. This suggests a deeply ingrained cultural practice which resulted in a high level of non-kinship-based reciprocity. The practice also bespeaks a relative lack of ethnocentrism because people are taking in non-relatives as household members, whereas in the rest of Eurasia people tended to surround themselves with biological relatives. Simply put, genetic relatedness was less important in Europe, and especially in the Nordic areas of Europe. The unique feature of the simple household system was the high percentage of non-relatives. Unlike the rest of Eurasia, the pre-industrial societies of northwestern Europe were not organized around extended kinship relationships, and it is easy to see that they are pre-adapted to the Industrial Revolution and the modern world generally. This simple household system is a fundamental feature of individualist culture. Recent research by evolutionary economists provide fascinating insight on the difference between individualistic cultures versus collectivist cultures. An important aspect of this research is to model the evolution of cooperation among individualistic peoples. Fair and Gachter in 2002 found that people will altruistically punish defectors in a one-shot game, a game in which participants only interact once and are thus not influenced by the reputations of the people with whom they are interacting. This situation therefore models an individualistic culture because participants are strangers with no kinship ties. The surprising finding was that subjects who made high levels of public goods donations tended to punish people who did not, even though they did not receive any benefit from doing so. Moreover, the punished individuals changed their ways and donated more in future games, even though they knew that the participants in later rounds were not the same as in previous rounds. Fair and Gachter suggests that people from individualistic cultures have an evolved negative emotional reaction to free riding that results in their punishing such people even at cost of themselves, hence the term altruistic punishment. Okay, that's very important, altruistic punishment. Essentially, Fair and Gachter provide a model of the evolution of cooperation among individualistic peoples. Europeans are thus exactly the sort of groups modeled by Fair and Gachter. They are groups with high levels of cooperation with strangers rather than with extended family members, and they are prone to market relations and individualism. This suggests the possibility that the key for a group intending to turn Europeans against themselves is to trigger their strong tendency toward altruistic punishment by convincing them the evil of their own people. Because Europeans are individualists at heart, they readily rise up in moral anger against their own people once they are seen as free riders and therefore morally blameworthy, a manifestation of their much stronger tendency toward altruistic punishment deriving from their evolutionary past as hunter-gatherers. In making judgments of altruistic punishment, relative genetic distance is irrelevant. Free riders are seen as strangers in a market situation, i.e., they have no familial or tribal connection with the altruistic punisher. The best strategy for a collectivist group for destroying Europeans, therefore, is to convince the Europeans of their own moral bankruptcy. This is exactly what Marxist intellectual movements have done. They have presented European civilization as morally bankrupt and the proper target of altruistic punishment. The consequence is that once Europeans are convinced of their own moral depravity, they will destroy their own people in a fit of altruistic punishment. The general dismantling of the culture of the West, and eventually its demise as anything resembling an ethnic entity, will occur as a result of a moral onslaught, triggering a paroxysm of altruistic punishment, and thus the intense effort among Marxist intellectuals to continue the ideology of the moral superiority of non-Europeans and its role as undeserving historical victim, while at the same time continuing the onslaught on the moral legitimacy of the West.